Good morning, everyone. Welcome to What's Up Downtown, DTO Rising. We have a great presentation scheduled for you this morning with David Barilla, Assistant Director of the DDB CRA. David has been with the city over 12 years. He is outstanding. He won the McNamara Employee Award for the City of Orlando last year. And he has his bachelor's degree from UCF and his master's from Huff School of Business. He's phenomenal. He has his hands in every single project within the DDB and CRA. He's integral to the Downtown Development Board and the City of Orlando. He loves to fish. He takes his kids fishing with him all the time. He's a great dad as well as a great employee with the City of Orlando. Let's welcome David Barilla. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me, by the way? I'm not huge on mics. I don't know why. I think I probably make everybody deaf because I have a tendency to talk loud. So good morning. Good morning. Oh, that was great. I don't have to ask you twice. As you heard, my name is David Barilla, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Downtown Development Board and Community Redevelopment Agency. So it's a mouthful that I've had in these 12 years. But I'm really excited to be with you all this morning and get kind of back to business, kind of in this post-COVID environment. So anybody here first time at a What's Up Downtown event? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Anybody first time in a long time? Coming back? Well, awesome. So it's even better to that extent. We hope you make it more of a regular occurrence and you join us to hear about all the great things that we have going on in downtown. So I think I have over like 100 slides, so there's a lot. So I may talk about some a little bit faster than others. We'll do a Q&A at the end. Don't be shy to ask any questions. I'm happy to make up an answer for you, and I hope that it sounds good. So we'll get going. So if you don't know about downtown Orlando, what we call that area is ultimately this. So this is about 1,600 acres. It goes from Westmoreland on our west side, pretty much Summerlin on our east side, kind of go to Colonial, Dogleg up around the Ivanhoe district, just side of that, if you're familiar with that area. And then Gore, which is pretty much one large block south of the 408 on our south side. We split that up into different planning areas. We have our Paramore district here in blue, the CBD, Central Business District, where we're sitting right now. Eola district, can't miss that, got that big spot of blue in it. Right down here at Lake Lucerne for obvious reasons, and then the North Quarter. So you heard me mention the Downtown Development Board and the Community Redevelopment Agency. We wear 2 hats, one of which, the Downtown Development Board, was actually started first. This was started in the early 70s. Ultimately, when you saw the retail that was at that time, I wasn't around back then if anybody was wondering, but ultimately the retail that was really consolidated in downtowns left. It went to the major mall areas. So, right, things were controlled, you had air-conditioned space, which is great here in Florida, everything was kept up, seas of parking, very convenient. So you saw retailers leave downtown destinations, go to these major malls, and ultimately retailers in downtown areas found themselves unable to compete, right? They're ultimately only responsible for their small little shop space, and their neighbors may not be there, they may not be as caring of the area, they couldn't market ultimately with the same budgets that malls could. So they ultimately agreed to tax themselves. So if you're in DDB and you operate a business, you pay actually an additional tax, and that comes into us, and we manage that, and really then manage downtown almost like a mall, right? We do all the cleaning on the streets, we do the marketing and those type of things. That budget for that component is just over about $4 million a year that comes in off of that. The Community Redevelopment Agency was started a little later. It was started in the 80s. So after you saw the retail start to leave downtowns, then you saw people start to leave urban environments. We had, the kind of suburban boom. So as downtown started to decrease, good morning, don't worry, we just started, welcome. Then you saw this component of being able to start tax increment financing districts. So ultimately the county and the city agreed that they would freeze the tax base within the downtown area, which I showed you before, and any increment, so as properties appreciated in value, or as new properties were developed, any additional taxes that were developed over that time would ultimately go into a separate fund for a group to reinvest solely in that area. That's the Community Redevelopment Agency. That's the lion's share of what we do. That budget is just a little bit over $40 million a year. So now I'll walk you through a little bit about what makes that up. The area I showed you is about 300 blocks. We have more than 200 dining and nightlife establishments. We have over 1,500 events a year. We'll talk a little bit later about how that actually came to be, the vision of Mayor Dyer, but I haven't done the math recently. This used to be like an 1,100 number. We've actually done more post-COVID, but that's probably, I don't know, maybe a little less than four events a night you can figure out. It doesn't work out that way. There's not 4.5 events or whatever it is going on tonight. But ultimately, there's always something happening in downtown Orlando if you want to come and just mingle and have a good time. We have over 2,000 hotel rooms now within the area, and we have a free downtown transportation system called Limo. That is the name of the system. It is not a description of the vehicle. So if you stand out in the corner and you're waiting for a limo to pick you up, you will be standing there for quite a while. It's an electric bus that will circulate you fare-free in downtown, and then we have 2 Sunrail stops. So a little bit about kind of the high view. We have just over $3.7 billion of recent development, about 10,500 residential units. Now that number, yay, I got to clap for that. That number has literally grown, and our residents have literally grown. It's doubled, ultimately, almost since Mayor Dyer has come into office, which was back in 2003. We have a 90% apartment occupancy rate, which is really great that we're able to sustain that. We're in one of the most desirable neighborhoods to live in Central Florida. Almost 13 million square feet of class, or not all Class A, but rentable office space, significant amount of that Class A. About 89% office occupancy rate, 88,000 jobs or so, and ultimately approaching that 20,000 residential population number. And that will walk through basically 3 components. We'll talk about what projects are proposed. Right now, we still have projects being proposed. We'll talk about which ones are in progress, and then finally, I'll kind of skim through some that have been recently completed. You see a high-level overview. 12 of them are currently proposed, and 11 are ultimately underway as we speak. If anybody wants a copy of this, we can share it with you. This is a video. I hope it's loud enough to go here.
The origin of my tower, the face center. The future. A place where diversity drives innovation and our inclusive culture welcomes you to join. Downtown Orlando is the epicenter of an unstoppable opportunity economy that's magnetizing innovation. Centrality, mobility, livability, and a variety of spaces and development sites offer space to start and space to grow. From headquarters to startups, downtown is the center of gravity and home of an amplified future. We're the year-round stage, arena, stage, kitchen, market, and campus at one of the world's most beloved cities, and full, bright, and amplified. Turn up downtown.
All right, so that was a component of our one of our most recent marketing campaigns, Turn Up Downtown, that you saw there, highlighting a number of things that I just showed you. Before we get into that, some of our support services, you heard me mention these. We are sitting in our Discover Downtown space. It is our information center. Rose, who introduced us, manages the space. You guys can say
Anything today is 15% off because you're here.
all right, so we got a sale. And there's like a huge sale rack I was looking at. So if you're a barber shop, I think I saw like 50 and 40% over there as well. So check us out. All local goods. Is that right, Rose? So they either focus on Orlando or they're ultimately manufactured right here. So definitely check it out. We have our clean team. So I mentioned you can kind of keep the streets clean. They are basically responsible for all the right-of-way in that 1,600 acres. So imagine if you had 1,600 acres of yard that you have. So they're very busy. Obviously, we're really happy to have them, and they do a great job for us. Then we have our ambassador program. So has anybody seen these kind of bright shirt individuals kind of walking the streets, or maybe they've interacted with you at some point? They're actually based right here. It's a service we provide. And ultimately, they do a couple different things. One of the biggest components, as we're trying to be more, of course, welcoming downtown and neighborhood, is hospitality services. They ultimately will help you with any information that you need. If it's raining, they have umbrellas. They can walk you to the car, provide you escorts wherever you need to go. But we also have another component for an outreach team that looks to help our less fortunate. So they interact with the unfortunate homeless situation that we are faced with here, and really the country is faced with nationally, and connect them with a variety of support services that either are kind of directly augmented by other work we do, or other agencies provide within the area. All right, so now to some of the developments. So here's what's proposed right now. So this is a 3-story office building. This is actually in our Paramore neighborhood, so we're really excited about this development. It's being done by Interstruct. So Interstruct, they're kind of a design, build, and architecture firm. 9,500 square feet of space, and you see some other projects in here that they're actually building or working on as well. This project, so Camden Suites, who's seen this project before? Yeah, there you go. We've been talking about this project for a long time. This actually sits on the corner of Washington and Roslyn, looks straight at Lake Eola. All right, there you go. It's still in the works. We actually had a meeting about it I don't say a week and a half ago, give or take. We're still working hard on it. It seems like ultimately they keep hitting hurdles. And the last hurdle was COVID. Obviously, the hotel market was one of the hardest hit by COVID, even though it was rebounding fairly strong. But they're excited about the project. They still anticipate moving forward, and they're actually looking at potentially increasing the density with a new component that they have going on. So that's the last one that was officially approved, but we'll see what the future holds for it. This year, 4-story residential building, this is actually being worked on by Interstruct, which I mentioned to you, Irma. So Irma is in our kind of north quarter area. So as I mentioned, downtown and a lot of our more neighborhood components of downtown, the Ola District, North Quarter District, are some of the most places of interest to live. Back, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years ago, give or take, we were actually rated the #1 search zip code on Realtor.com in the entire United States, where people were ultimately looking to live. So you can imagine that would be very challenging to get within the amount of places that they have to live here in our country. So Magnolia mixed use. So who is familiar with Sky House, building that recently sold? Yes. So if you're at Sky House and you're almost on the back side of that building, there's a little sliver of land back there. That's the site for this. So it's proposed to be a 26-story, 232-unit apartment building, and actually won't have to have parking because if you're generally familiar with that area, there's a parking garage actually right across the street. That's one of our old kind of sole-purpose parking garages. You don't see a lot of those in downtown because the code doesn't allow them anymore. But they would actually be able to use that parking and build this facility here. It's a $65 million investment. Mariposa Grove. So as you heard me mention numerous times, downtown is a very popular place to live. What that often equates to is price increases. So one of the challenges that we have in downtown, but really throughout Central Florida and a number of other areas of our country, is affordability. So this project, Mariposa Grove, is actually proposed to be an affordable housing development. It would seek low-income housing tax credits from the state. And this kind of block looking building here, that's Star Tower. So if you're familiar with Star Tower, there's a small site next to it. That is where that building would go. They have not received funding yet from Florida Housing Finance Corporation. If you're familiar with that process, they release RFAs, which is basically like a request for proposal. And then they award those components kind of on a competition-based process. So, but we're happy to have them putting that site together right here in downtown and the Viola. So the Monarch Tower, the Monarch has actually been through a couple renovations, but same site. So anybody know Orange County building, Orange offices, kind of right that way. Just south of that street, just south of that building, there's a parking garage, and then if you look just east, there's a large block there. That's where this site is, and this building would be. It's a mixed-use high-rise. It would have both a hotel component as well as a residential component. So we have hotel office buildings in downtown. We have residential/office buildings in downtown. We do not have a hotel/residential office building in downtown. So we're hopeful that this will be our first, and that represents a $42 million investment being done by Northland Investment Corporation and Baker Barrios. Okay. Pine Lake Mixed-Use Tower. So this site has actually been in the news a fairly lot for a number of different reasons. You may have heard it talked about most specifically for OMA, ring a bell, the Orlando Museum of Art. So this developer is actually the same developer who developed City Tower, which was across the street from this site, and was working with the Orlando Museum of Art to try and potentially relocate them into downtown. Unfortunately, that deal just couldn't come together under the time constraints that they had. But the project is still moving forward. What it's actually looking to include now, in lieu of the museum space, is a conference center, which I would argue we need just as much as potentially another large museum and entertainment component. So we're really excited about this. 33-story mixed-use tower, 228 hotel rooms with a really great flag that they're working with. The flag is ultimately kind of the brand, so to speak. And then some residential units that they're proposing to be condos. We haven't had condos developed in downtown since the last boom, which really represents kind of a shift in the market. We've been very heavily focused on rental, 741 parking spaces, and then just under 12,000 square feet of retail space. All right, the Edge. So the Edge, Church Street Ballroom. Everybody knows that building. That building, a lot of people think is historic. It is actually not. It was developed by Bob Snow back in the 80s. So this was actually what will be there. Lincoln Properties has probably of recent times, done some of the most recent significant developments we've had in downtown Atlanta. They developed the Aspire, they developed the new Tourist Plaza, and this will be right behind that. Mixed-use building, 34 stories tall, and you can see the other information there. They do have kind of a flagship hotel, and it's also looking like it could be somewhat of an apartment type concept. Lincoln Properties has done, we heard you mention before, the kind of true mixed-use component where you actually have 2 full uses in a building. We talked a little bit about having a hotel and a residential space. So the Aspire, which they did, has rental apartment as well as office space. Tourist Tower has the hotel, the AC hotel, and office space. And this would be fairly similar. What we worked with them on is actually integrating the Sunrail station into the ground floor of that building. So if any of you have rode Sunrail, and I certainly hope you have, but actually the south platform of Sunrail is actually across the street. It's across South Street, no pun intended. So it doesn't marry with the other component, which is not very urban, right? You kind of get out in literally a retention pond. So we really needed to relocate that to the north side of South, and we worked with them to integrate that through the ground floor of 2 developments. In order to do that, we had to get them to build it into both Tourist Plaza and this building, and they were successful in working out a public-private partnership in order to do that. So next, the signature. So this piece is actually on 41 South Roslyn Avenue. So we think here, the Grand. There's a little kind of boxy building right in front of the Grand. That's this site. So on that site, just directly behind the Dr. Phillips Center for Performing Arts, is where this will ultimately get developed. 19-story tower, 182 residential units, and 7,000 square feet of retail, $90 million investment. And you see the parking garage information there being done by Sona Development Group. Okay, 5 on Lake E. Oh, this one has also got some press. Anybody, I'll take a quick see if we can get some answer. Anybody know why this has got some press recently? Yes?
Because there are many units, 450 each, and 650 square feet, the beds roll up, they're completely furnished, they put your cable electricity in.
Exactly, thank you. So you all are paying attention, which is great. So micro units is kind of the term that is generally represented in the industry. So micro units are somewhat, they're new to the overall development community, not so much in more urban areas like the New Yorks and Chicago's, but new to us. So what you have there is a different approach to affordable, right? So are they more affordable? Yes, but it's not the traditional affordable where you say, okay, I have my same type unit and I just pay less. You just have a smaller unit, but you also pay less. So oftentimes those will have communal spaces. Some can think of those as more like, I don't want to say college dorm-esque, but you kind of have general living facilities or living rooms, things like that, but you still have all your facilities in your own unit, your bed, your small kitchen area, and the rest. But it's a way to ultimately provide units that are more affordable. So that is in Lake Eola. Lake Eola area, actually really more the Thornton Park area. So if you think of Thornton Park Central, it's kind of across the street from that. All right, so now let's talk about what's in progress right now, things that are moving forward and not just proposed. One of my personal favorite projects that we're doing is Art Square. So Art Square is actually a container-esque urban park right on the corner of Robinson and Orange. So there's a sliver of land there actually owned by Dr. Phillips. We worked out a lease with them at no cost. They're effectively giving us that property to utilize for at least 10 years. So we wanted to have a place where ultimately the community can gather, really focus on placemaking. As we I think most of us know kind of post-COVID, people are really enjoying being outside, having that fresh air, and ultimately having unique places to gather. This will hopefully be that. It's a 2-story structure. Actually, the second floor you will be able to potentially rent for various meetings or events that you would have. There'll be a stage, there'll be performances, live streaming. There'll kind of be a cafe and bar area as well, and spaces for food trucks. There'll be an art gallery. Pretty much every cool thing that you can imagine, we shoved it into this tiny little space, but had it very professionally designed, so we're really excited. The groundbreaking from the contract and the rest kind of happened late last year, but ultimately they're going to start moving dirt in about a week on this site, about a 6-month build process. So we are really excited for that to come online. We hope that you join us at the ribbon cutting. Bumby Arcade. So I think the easiest way to talk about Bumby Arcade is Cheyenne Saloon. Most of us know where Cheyenne Saloon is. It actually doesn't include the Cheyenne Saloon component, but that component of space that's just outside it, but interior to the building, if you know where Pepe's was or anything like that, is being completely redeveloped. Lincoln Properties, as I mentioned before, are kind of envisioning that space and putting in kind of a the new kind of eclectic food hall concept. So if any of you have been to Plant Street Market and those type of things in Winter Garden, it's that type of concept, different scale, different level. But they are building that out. We're really excited for that to open here probably in the next 6 months or so. I think they have 17 or 18 different vendors that they already have signed up for that space. So this, we have the Fountain View 5. So this is Mark Kinchler. Mark Kinchler has done several of our condo projects, more smaller redevelopments in downtown Orlando. Some of you may remember the Samsara, which was the redevelopment of a church on the north side of Lake Eola. This is actually a new development, same area, 5-unit townhome being built on just a former site of one single home, $4.5 million investment. The Orlando Magic training facility, so they are now, we know we have the Orlando Magic in downtown. We actually did not have their full training facility, we did not have their corporate offices, we just had their main stage. They moved their corporate offices actually to downtown, they're in the CNL buildings now, and they're also building this training facility. So they were, for all intents and purposes, be fully housed within downtown Orlando for a true city team. It's a $70 million investment. They also have a partnership with Advent Health. So there will be an office there that will focus on sports medicine, obviously the appropriate connection for what they do. Paramore Oaks. So Paramore Oaks is another one of our public-private partnerships. This is in Paramore, south of the 408 and just west of I-4. So you've heard me mention affordability in downtown and really throughout Florida is something that we struggle with. We were able to partner with this developer, which is a Fixus development, to do 2 developments, one of which is complete. That was Paramore Oaks Phase 1. Who would have thought? And that finished, I'm going to say, just about 2 years ago. They were also successful in moving on forward to Phase 2. We had some land there, and we worked with them to get that development started. Ultimately, this will be a 4-story building. It's adding, that's not right, that 9 units. It's 90 units. They forgot this additional 90 units, the 112 that they already have there. So we have a large context of what ultimately will be a very well-developed and recently developed. We have a number of things going on in that area, inclusive of, I don't think it's in here, but we're also building single-family homes, selling those as affordable to help just rebuild that area and that market and provide quality places for people to live at affordable prices. So the Society of Orlando, this is one of those projects that can actually kind of span both parts of this presentation, both proposed and under construction. This site, if you've been in Orlando for a while, this is like the former site of like the Casey Anthony media center. So when we had the Casey Anthony trial, you had all the media tents set up across the street from Orange County, the Orange County Courthouse. This is what's being developed on that site now. Phase 1, pretty much, and 2 are currently under development. When it is complete, this will be the largest residential building in all of downtown Orlando. And you can see that definitely by the massive structure of it. Over 1,300 square foot parking spaces, 704 residential units, and 41,000 square feet of commercial space, which is extensive and truly appreciated here in our downtown. $85 million in investment. So the 500, you've seen a few renditions of this. To give you some context, the old AT&T building, kind of on Orange Avenue, that building that looks, it has windows which are very thin, it looks like very fortress-esque. That's this building. Interestingly enough, all those kind of stone components can actually just be removed from the facade of the building, so that's kind of contextually what they're doing. Those will come off, it will re-put on new facade with windows, build it out. It will be the future home of the GSA, who is leasing the entire building. They'll also be adding a parking garage to it to accommodate those new office users. All right, Under I, another project that we've been talking about for a while. We've been saying, hey, we can't start this until Under I is complete. Well, guess what? Under I is now complete, so or contextually complete, I should say. So underneath that, you may remember we used to have 900 parking spaces that actually are owned by FDOT, the Florida Department of Transportation, but they allowed us to manage for obvious reasons. When Ultimate I-4 was proposed and redone, a big component of that was raising the deck level there. So if you used to be underneath those parking spaces, we had a very low deck, somewhat ominous place to be, even though you were able to park there fairly cheaply. So as we looked forward and said, hey, what's the best use for this space? We said, well, as we look to be a more multimodal city, we should probably look to create more unique places that people can gather. What you see here is a kind of an artist rendering of some early conceptual components. This is not by any means what would anticipate to be there. this was kind of just talking through the concept of, hey, what could this ultimately be? So we actually have an RFP to get a consultant in right now. We're actually in the final stages of negotiating with them. That, if I can boil down a 100-page request for proposals, it's ultimately for them to scour the world and ultimately recommend to us the most interesting, unique, and important urban park in all of the world to that extent. So if you think about like Millennium Park in Chicago or something like that, I don't want to say we're trying to recreate that, we're not. We're trying to create something that not only the community appreciates and utilizes, but also as a destination. So when people are coming to Universal or they're coming to Disney World, they say, you know what, wow, I really got to get downtown and check out this awesome park and get my picture taken by the beam and the concept of what I was talking about before. So we're excited about bringing this to fruition. Still a few years off, but closer than we've ever been before. So that's a little bit on that. You can't talk about downtown without talking about Creative Village. So Creative Village, I'll kind of spare you some of the contextual details, but very high levels, former site of the Amway Arena. And you can see kind of originally this was proposed to be a $1 billion new development, 900 to 1.4 million square feet of office space. You see the educational space, which we now know is UCF and Valencia. 1,200 to 1,500 residential units, ground floor commercial, and hotel rooms. Well, as luck would have it, things would shift and our original vision would change, but I think it changed for the better. But to give you an idea of how this all played out, back in 04-05, when the concept of building the Magic and New Arena started, a study was released. And we said, okay, what can we do? How can we repurpose this massive arena, right, that's sitting ultimately in the smack dab center of our urban environment? And it kind of came back and it said two large things, right? It said, well, it'd be great for a megachurch to that extent. So some people know Joel Osteen, kind of he meets in a former arena to that extent. Or you can look at a full, complete urban redevelopment project. Obviously, we selected full, complete redevelopment project. We sought ultimately a developer, sort of a master developer, meaning they don't develop all the individual buildings themselves, but they manage the overall development of the entire area. That's Creative Village Development. The person who's most noted with is kind of Craig Usler and Tim Baker, are kind of partners in that. Bank of America is actually the largest of the partners in that process. They were selected in the participation process and ultimately are now on board with us. So kind of what's happened since? Well, the first component of that, you heard me say Bank of America is the largest partner. Their interest, and we're happy that it's their interest, was affordable housing. They wanted to ensure that affordable housing, and we wanted to ensure that affordable housing got returned to that neighborhood. This was one of the first projects out of the ground. Right here, Amelia Court is complete, 256 units, and you see that 183 of them are affordable. There's also rental spaces on the bottom. EA Sports, which was a huge win for us. Those of us inside the city, we've been courting EA Sports for a long time, since the early 2000s. There's been a number of times, it was actually 4 times, we were at the table with them, trying to lure them here where their move was imminent. We actually had to have these code names to that extent when we work on these projects, because they're confidential. So the code name when we got them here was literally Project Quattro. It was like, okay, here we go again, type deal. But we were successful this time, and really I think it was the right time. They really bought on to the Creative Village vision, and ultimately were our pioneer of large investment into that community. Built a completely new facility solely for them, 180,000 square feet. What we asked them to do as part of that was bring 600 of their full-time employees here. This was pre-COVID. So then they were literally building this component during COVID, and we said, oh darn, are you guys still going to bring your 600 employees here? Because we obviously hear a lot about hybrid work and remote work, and a lot of it in the tech field for obvious reasons. And speaking with Daryl, he says, yeah, I'm bringing 600, I'm actually going to probably bring more than 1,000. So they're there now, we're excited, they love their facility, and we're excited to have them, and they're serving as a great anchor as we continually build out that space. Next component, most of us have heard about this, was bringing UCF to the table. We have Dr. Phillips Commons, which is ultimately where a large portion of the classes are held. In 2019, just in time for COVID, we got them here with 8,000 students, but their commitment has remained. This is kind of one of our cool newer visuals, so you can see a number of different things kind of going on here, but ultimately the context of how close the connection of this entire new urban development is to the core of our city, and how exciting it is to have that opportunity to bring together. So this is Union West. Union West is both a student housing component as well as a educational space and then some retail space. So Valencia, which was not envisioned when we originally started this process, but has been a great partner, brought a complete culinary facility to Creative Village. You know, we're a tourist market, so to a large extent, even though it's not the lion's share of what we do. So you can imagine the need for culinary in all the great restaurants, especially they have in Disney and Universal, the restaurant area. So there was a drastic need for that in our area. So they committed to that, put a full facility there, as well as the apartment units that are there, and then the ground floor retail space. What's this one? So this is underway. This is Luminary Green. So we haven't talked about Project DTO, but if you've heard about it at all, it was in 2015, where we ultimately did a visioning process with over 100 individuals within our area, and then had a lot of outer interaction. And what they said, one of the big things they wanted us to focus on was adding green space. That, hey, we want more places to connect and be outside in the area. You've seen, I talked about Art Square before as one of them, I'll talk about some more later, but Luminary Green is that dedication in the middle of Creative Village. So it literally spans from Lake Dot on the north side all the way down to Dr. Phillips Commons on the south. So the major buildings literally line that park and really make a unique and exciting place to spend some time. That is a fairly accurate rendering of what will be there. It's not meant to be very development heavy and be very confusing and have a lot of different things. It's meant to be a place to gather where you can have yoga in the middle of the lawn and things like that. So we're focusing on activation of the space, so it's really exciting. It should be open here in probably about 60 days or so. The luminary term is actually focusing on luminaries, which are people who have really brought light to the Paramore neighborhood, which is where it sits. Earlier this week, the city announced kind of the original dedication of who those individuals will be, and there'll actually be some more added as time goes on. Here is another view of that. Then the Julian, which is complete. So this is actually our highest rent per square foot building in all of downtown Orlando. So if you told people probably 10 years ago that you would pay the highest rent within our Paramore, community, that you probably would have looked at you a little cross-eyed, like, what are you talking about? But the context is that still people are looking to be there. But the other component of that is the importance of what I started with. And the first building out of the ground was affordable housing, and making sure that there are opportunities for people to still live there in the area and be affordable. 14-story, 409 units. This building sold for, I want to say, just shy of $145 million here. Just recently, it was a $108 million investment. The Usler Development and the Alec Morris Company were partners in that. That's where we go to grow. If you haven't been there, great restaurant there. And then here we have Modera. So Modera is downtown. They built this site right over here where the University Club is. They have also built this project as well. This kind of sits on the other side of Luminary Green. That's Luminary Green right there. 8-story project, 292 units, and then 10,000 square feet of residential space, $75 million investment on their behalf. We talked about Dr. Phillips Commons a little bit already. And I don't have an image of this one, unfortunately, but this is partial XY. So on the south side of the development, pretty much right on the pretty much south, I guess, west corner of Luminary Green, the Alan Morris Company, which developed the Julian Usler Development, they're partnering on this project to do 3 different things. It will be a residential tower. It will be a 185,000 square foot office building, and then additionally it will be a hotel, as well as a kind of a public gathering area. So a very significant development. All of it's important. I think the most important component is it will be our first multi-tenant office building within the Creative Village footprint. So one of the big components of us working so hard and really partnering with EA was to establish downtown and specifically Creative Village as the creative hub, and kind of getting more towards the gaming hub of Central Florida and potentially the Southeast. Well, you can't do that unless you have spaces for those companies to be, right? And we've got a lot of interest, and some of them are located in downtown right now, but ultimately we need space, an office building where the companies that can't build their own facility all by themselves to occupy can be. This will be a component of that when it's complete, $275 million investment there. So where are we today? We're about $700 million investment value. We have those 8,000 students, 965 apartments, which is almost fully built out to what we initially anticipated, 640 student housing beds, and 2,100 new residents were there by 2021. And you can see the EA office space, which we spent some time talking about it. This is an overview, just so you can kind of see. Obviously, the Luminary Green component here, as I mentioned, the Dr. Phillips Center kind of anchors the bottom, Lake Dot anchors the top, and then you can see EA, the Modera Development. This here is Union West, the Julian, and you see some of the other components there as well. Here's another view for you from a different perspective. But the underlying component between all of this, kind of the magic sauce, if you will, has been public-private partnerships. Right? It's taking both the private sector coming together with us and finding unique and new ways to really make development happen, and really provide things not only for the area to develop, but also for the community to be served. So you can see a host of names there that have all come together to make this happen, and they truly were all very important in that. So let's complete these. I'm going to zoom through because I want to give you all some time to ultimately ask questions if you have any. You build all these people, you add them all to downtown, you stuff them in small spaces, and what happens? Well, you need places to store their goods, so storage is often overlooked, but ultimately this site is on Colonial. It's MySpace storage, it has some residential, some retail at the bottom. Camden Lake Eola, this site was originally being developed by Jefferson Apartment Group, or JAG as they're often referred to. Right before it went out of the ground, they sold everything to Camden. Camden also bought their project across the street, the 420 building, but it is there today, just in our Eola area. Dr. Phillips Center for Performing Arts, who has not been to this time that's all yet? Anybody? Good. All right. If you haven't, and you're just too shy to raise your hand, you got to check it out. It is an amazing facility. We are not in the top 30 largest cities in the world, by any means, right? But we have one of the top performing arts centers in the world right here in our own backyard, and it's for all of us to enjoy and access. So, if you haven't yet, please take the time to experience it. I'll show you some more info about that in a little bit. We added some hospitality to the mix. So this is the formal site of the Travel Lodge in downtown. Now actually there's two different flags, Home Suites and Hilton Garden Inn. Irving Park in our North Quarter area. Some more kind of urbanist themed townhomes, 21 of them in our North Quarter area. The MAA Robinson Apartments, so right here on Orange. These were developed, $65 million investment, 11-story apartment complex, and just over 700 parking spaces. If you've been paying attention to numbers at all, this building is way over parked. And the reason for that is this site was actually the parking lot for the church, so the St. James Catholic Church, that's actually across the street. So in order to redevelop it, they had to replace the parking for the church, and they did that in order to ultimately create this building. So the Mondrian on Lake Eola, so that's the new name of the building that's back over here that I mentioned, Mill Creek developed. That was recently sold as well. It's really cool, just kind of outdoor space. If you haven't visited, check it out. They kind of have this outdoor living room and pool area as an amenity deck there. University Club on the ground floor. Also, some retail spaces as well. One of the ones that's got some notoriety recently is the Trophy Room. The Trophy Room is a high-scale apparel and ultimately sneaker shop. It actually came out of Disney Springs, so one of the highest retail corridors in all of Central Florida, near downtown. And I think the reason they were successful there, but they moved here for a number of reasons, but it is operated by Marcus Jordan, who is Michael Jordan, one of Michael Jordan's sons in that location. So this here, Napa Lucerne, so this is one of the developments we have on the south side of 408. So we have Earth Fair in this building. Very kind of unique building in the form of the way its architecture was done, but it's extremely pretty. It has brick, both traditional brick as well as white brick, surrounding various components of it. And as I mentioned, brought another grocer to our downtown. Orange County Public Schools, so the ACE School, Academic Center for Excellence. I asked a question before, so to see if any of y'all still paying attention. Why is the ACE School so important, or what unique thing have they done that really changes the dynamic of the way Paramore operates? Anybody? Anybody know?
Is it trades?
What's that?
Is it trade focused?
No, it's not. It's K to 8. Well, it's pre-K actually. It's pre-K to 8, so it's very young.
I was going to say that when brought all the students in Paramore back.
Yes, it did absolutely do that. So when desegregation happened, ultimately, kind of the Paramore community did not have a school. Because they were shipped all around to different schools to ultimately make sure numbers match, and we had this contextual component. It brought them back to a school, but even more importantly than that, through a partnership with Harris Rosen, to that extent, he made a commitment that said, hey, anybody or any child, right, who goes to this school, he added the pre-K component, right, because understanding that, oftentimes K is not when parents are doing the work anymore, it's oftentimes sooner than that. I said, hey, if they start at this school and they go through the zone school system from now until ultimately through high school, the public school system, I'll basically pay for college, period. So you can imagine the context of kind of actually seeing a vision of potentially living in Paramore and just going to the school you're zoned for and having your college completely paid for, potentially all the way up through UCF Medical School. So it's a tremendous way to ultimately kind of establish a component for the community, not only to kind of see a pathway to their own success, but then to giving back to their community ultimately is what you need people to do once they've been to the other side. So it's an amazing development that we have there, and the story, which is just now starting to play out, right? We've only had the school for a few years, but you know, in 10, 15 years, when we can get to see some of the outcomes of this, I can only imagine what we'll have to say at that point. What did I skip over here? Paramark's phase 1, so I talked about that a little bit before. This is the first phase of the Invictus development. That part is also complete. You can see some of the numbers on that there. Radius apartments, so if you're driving north on Roslyn and you don't turn when the street curves, you will now crash into this building. That's what this is, Radius Apartment Towers, built by Banner Development, 389 units, as well as the ground floor retail. The Olive Townhouses, so small development, only 6 units. This is just south of Lake Eola, in kind of our Eola South area. And then Truist Plaza, we talked about that. This was done by Lincoln. You got an AC Hotel kind of above this podium here. You kind of see it there. And then about 200,000 square feet of office space underneath that, as well as a parking deck. And they have some outdoor dining there, Foxtail there. Excited to have them. $125 million investment. Last thing I'll talk about is our venues program. So I said kind of early on, kind of the vision when Mayor Dyer took office, one of the visions I should say, was establishing downtown as a place to come and ultimately experience, no matter if you're local or if you are here just traveling for a bit. So what that involved was creating a sports and entertainment corridor. So you can kind of see how that developed over time. So what we now call Campbell Stadium was actually added to the CRA, so we have significant reinvestments in that, which have raised the scale of it extensively, and now we have more bowl games, and that is activated pretty much more than any arena in the United States, so I hope you have a chance to take it. As you literally come down Church Street, you then have the Exploria Stadium, Orlando City soccer team, as well as the Pride team. So originally when we envisioned this, soccer really wasn't kind of big in the United States yet, so we said, well, that should probably be a minor league baseball team. So we shifted and morphed, but ultimately very happy to have the Orlando City here. We all know about Amway Center, which we talked about, and the Magic, the sports entertainment development. There'll be a piece on that across the way. And then ultimately with the Dr. Phillips Center for Performing Arts. So for the most part, that vision kind of in that context is now complete. Now we're working on the rest of the connection, but it really kind of established us as the central, the living room, if you will, of our downtown, or of our area. So people can enjoy a multitude of different things. I just mentioned Sports Entertainment District. So this is the former site of the city parking garage that's right across the street from the Amway Arena. Ultimately, when it's complete, this was one of the renderings. They're working on some new things now, but it's envisioned to be something like a Staples Center, LA Live type concept, where you have a large space, this would be Amway Center, for people to gather, augmented by office buildings, residential, as well as potentially a conference center. Extremely dense development, extremely risky development, quite frankly, especially to do this where it's located. But the Magic have assured us that they are still committed to making it or bringing it to fruition. Some other views of what that could look like. I talked about Exploria Stadium a little bit. Here's a cool view. Again, you can see just how connected the stadium is with the rest of our downtown. As you see our piece kind of peeking up, it's a great view if you haven't had a chance to see it. Here is one other perspective that we have. Camden Stadium, as I mentioned, we had a significant amount of new investments in that space to really make it compete for large concerts and stadium shows. We spent recently over $200 million on that. Here's some images of how they've been activated. WrestleMania, a lot of people discount the WWE, but people show up and they come from far and wide to ultimately see. You can see how packed WrestleMania was when we hosted that, and we're hoping to host that again. Pro Bowl, most of you know we hosted that several times, and then Monster Jam, another one of the big events that we were able to host there. And then the Dr. Phillips Center for Performing Arts. So you see the multitude of different theaters here, and the one that most recently opened, the Steinmetz Hall, is contextually acoustically perfect. So when you think about live music and orchestras and those type of things, it's very important how those buildings are constructed. You can't just put out some seats in a really cool looking room and make sure the sound is appropriate. It is developed into every neat aspect of this building. So the floors and the walls literally contextually float, if you will, to redirect sound in the appropriate manner so you can really appreciate all that the artists are performing. So again, very excited about that space. This is just kind of an overview. We have the 2,700 seat Disney Theater. That was one of the original phase ones. Then the Steinmetz Hall, 1,700 square feet. And then also very importantly, smaller theaters where community events and community shows can happen that potentially can't pack out those larger halls. Transportation, a couple quick things. If you haven't seen this bridge, it goes over Colonial as we look to connect our urban trail. So we really have a trail system that goes completely through downtown and hopefully throughout our area. Colonial's a tough street to cross. If you haven't tried it, I understand why, but we now have a bridge that gets you over it. Sunrail, we have 2 stops, Central Station as well as Church Street. And then I-4 that most of you have heard about now. If you haven't taken the express lanes, they're not free anymore. You have to pay for them. But ultimately, you can see how they traverse through the center of the street. And if you haven't taken them, you aren't aware, those tolls are dynamic. And what that means is the toll changes. And the reason it does is so that anytime you get in that express lane, that it's actually an express lane. It's not just a bumper-to-bumper component to get through. So as more people get in the lane, it will get more and more expensive to ultimately decrease the desire for people to get in the lane, unless they ultimately need to. But should you need to pass kind of the main corridor of our central city in a quick amount of time, you can pay that toll and ultimately pass right on through. They just put in these accent lanes, actually. I saw them the other day, so if you come through at night, you can kind of see those lights. We have scooters, love-hate relationship with those. I won't bore you on, but they're scattered throughout downtown. And that is what I have. So I'll turn it over to you all. Thank you. Wow.
Sunrail to the airport, done deal.
Is Sunrail to the airport a done deal? Are you trying to get me in trouble, Bob? I think it's a conceptual done deal. So what I mean, the commitment to make that happen is completely there. Have all the nuances of what it takes to make that happen been done? No. But having a connection from downtown to the airport, and I'm not saying that that's Sunrail, I think is what is a conceptual done deal, and we'll have to see how that plays out. The Bright Line getting added to the mix of what our transportation system is, and that connects us all the way down to South Florida, is a huge part of that. So in that context, I think we can safely say we're hopeful that it happens. It's just a determination of what it looks like and how.
Last question is urban trail around Orlando. Is there going to be condition?
Well, it's a complicated answer. Here's why. The difficult part of building a truly urban trail is it's urban, and we don't control all the land. It's not like we can just say, okay, we map out this course and pave it all and plant some trees. So a number of different components. One of the actually most significant components from a connection standpoint is the site on Jefferson, 100 West Jefferson, which is just west of the Jefferson Garage, if you think about that. And why I give that as an example is those private properties that kind of have to be ultimately developed to bring in those missing teeth. So as those components come in, what we are requiring of those developers is that they put in those portions of trail. So it's difficult to say, hey, this is when it's going to be complete. I think the exciting thing is that the dedication is there and you see steady growth. So we actually have what's called a gap analysis actually complete, which is identify what those gaps are and what needs to be done to get there. So I think what we will see, if we talk about a downtown master plan, that's a master planning process that we have going on right now in downtown. That's kind of re-envisioning what our experience downtown would be like, from the streets to the right-of-ways as well as retail spaces. That component is only looking at, hey, ways, how can we augment that in the interim, so potentially we're not waiting on one site to develop, how can we get people through these areas in other ways? Great. Going back, and Jim up. Yes?
Thank you. Appreciate you being here. I had some friends come in from Central California, not LA, Central California, Santa Rosa, very pretty. And they stayed at the Grand Bohemian, and they could not believe how clean our city is. So I know all of us that have traveled to other cities, I think we take this for granted, but they must have said it 5 times. I'm like, okay. And they're like, no, you don't understand. This city is spotless. And they were delighted to stay at the Grand Bohemian. That's the first thing. So thank you. That $4 million, it shows, because this place is very clean compared to other cities. My one concern, I own the Eola Hair Lounge on the corner of Roslyn and Washington. I've heard rumors that you guys are going to change the direction of Roslyn, so I'd like to know if you know any more about that. And then the parking there is so precious. Please tell me you're not going to take away parking spaces on Roslyn, but I'd like to know why you would change. Roslyn is heading out of downtown and making it 2-way or 1-way. I'd like some clarity on that. Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you for the kind word. It's oftentimes We hear more of the complaints, and they're valid complaints oftentimes, and things that happen to that extent. And we're not perfect, but we appreciate the feedback. Our clean team works very hard to ultimately ensure that we can provide the cleanest space as feasibly possible. The second component, you heard me just mention a little bit, kind of on the tail notes when I was responding about the downtown master plan. That's contextually what you've heard about. It now goes by Project DTO 2.0. It's kind of the implementation phase of what our envisioning process that happened back in 2015 was. So we have a consultant group, it's Perkins, Will, Nelson, and Ibar, who's working with us to envision, yes, a potential lane shift. In Project DTO, the 2015 analysis, that was one of the recommendations that came out of that. And it's difficult to imagine because we've lived with this so long, but downtown in and of itself is very, I think, challenging for people who are not familiar with it to navigate. And the Roslyn and Orange, they're kind of our north-south pairs, really don't function as local streets, which from a planning perspective, you have planners, local streets are how businesses thrive. Like if you said, hey, I got a business on the side of I-4, people would look at you kind of like you're crazy. Like, what are you talking about? We're trying to get through here. But from a planning standpoint, that's kind of how Orange and Roslyn effectively operate, as people are just cruising through, as quick as possible and kind of darting through traffic to kind of get from the south end to the north end or vice versa. So the concept that's being potentially proposed, and it's not final yet, so I don't want to allude to that, is we're having them look at two-waying those streets to ultimately make them more accessible, so that people travel through the area at slower speeds, so it becomes less of a pass-through downtown to a donation-based downtown, so that people aren't just using Orange and Roslyn to, hey, I got to get up to Colonial, this, that, and the rest. They'll choose other arteries in order to do that. But while they do that, we actually gain space. We get our right-of-ways back, so we don't have 3+ lanes on Orange and 3+ lanes on Roslyn. We actually can add more parking, make places easier to access and the rest. So that is not complete by any means. We had to have all the analysis seeing how effective that truly is. There's a number of cities that have actually already done this that we've looked at, and they've seen extremely great results. One of them, specifically the businesses, was something they did in Oklahoma City, and they polled the businesses prior to the redevelopment and then after, and on average, their sales went up 50% when it was ultimately complete. Which, if you can imagine, if that's all profit, if you were profitable before, you get additional 50% of the profit, that's huge. Again, because at the end of the day, what it's looking to do is make downtown more accessible. That involves a number of different things, but ultimately, it's kind of about retaking the public space and utilizing it in the most appropriate manner. Yeah, Robinson's moving forward. So that's an FDOT sponsored project. But if you don't know, Robinson, which is kind of one of our east-west corridors on the north side of Lake Eola, is moving to a complete streets component, which ultimately means a complete street serves all types of transportation, so bike, walkability, as well as vehicular. So taking back some of those lanes, making a bike path, and the rest. Jim?
On the 5, the micro-unit project, how did you deal with the parking?
How did you deal with the parking? Very difficultly. So the struggle with micro-units often is the parking, as Jim was pointing out. So as you stack more people into a building, making less space, we are not necessarily in an environment like New York or Chicago where people don't have cars. We'd like to get there, but we're not there yet. So parking, they worked with them to reduce ultimately the amount. I think we landed at, I think it's 1 or just shy of 1, quote me on that, but I think it's about per unit, which ultimately reduced it. And I also had them augment components of multimodal transportation into their development, right? So they have to have the appropriate bike racks and various types of things that make it easy for those individuals to use alternate methods of transportation along the way.
What is the normal level per unit?
It varies depending on the number of bedrooms you have, because, but I think that's a contextual component as to what we would look at, probably more like 1.5.
They save some money on parking.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
What needs to be word on simple size?
What the Sentinel site's going to do? They're going to bring a great newspaper back there. It's going to take over the world. No. So the Sentinel site is owned by Alex Padilla. You probably don't know the name. Alex Padilla is a developer actually out of Miami. One of his most notable projects is Midtown Miami. Google it. It's an amazing development. And he kind of envisions bringing Midtown Miami and literally bringing something called Midtown Orlando. And it really fits, right? Because it's kind of in the middle between our north border and our main CBD. So nothing formal yet. He's kind of integrated into the master planning process, so our master planning team is talking with him about what he envisions, but nothing definitive yet.
That's such a big for so long, it's so much land that it's start knocking down buildings or putting a fence up so you don't look at that empty parking lot or anything. It
Yeah.
just looks like that's the one part that's around.
No, I absolutely hear you. So, you know, it's challenging. There's only so much we can force somebody to do, right? You have property rights. We're all happy that we have property rights. He has knocked down buildings. So there was a building on the south side of Amelia. He knocked that down to that extent, fenced it off, put some temporary parking in there. But it's a touchy area for what our ultimate control is. I think the good component, right, wrong, or otherwise, is that Alex has a track record. You know what I mean? So sometimes you can get lost in that when we're looking at that component. Sometimes you can get pieces where large companies come in and buy parcels and they sit on them. He's not necessarily sitting on it. He wants to make sure that he does the right project and does it the right way. So we're hopeful that happens sooner rather than later. Yes?
I live down in the old district, and I really reap the rewards of all your hard work. I appreciate that. I do have a concern about after dark, what goes on in downtown Orlando. We recently increased the police force, and activity is growing there.
Absolutely. So, most of you may, you know, if you don't live under Rockefeller, downtown Orlando is very vibrant. We have a lot of people that come in downtown at night. And unfortunately, over the past 12, 18 months, some of that has got to be more violent. We've had some shootings. I'm not discounting that, but I'm saying I think that's, for most of us who've researched it, and we spent a lot of time researching it, it's a national phenomenon that a lot of cities are grappling with as kind of why people are becoming really more weapons-based violence to that extent, and we're not isolated from it, which is unfortunate. But yes, we have completely not ignored it. We've done a number of different things. Kind of right after that happened, you saw us really commit almost $2 million just towards safety and security in downtown. We augmented the police force's camera systems throughout downtown. So they not only switched out all their old cameras so they have much more high definition ones, but we also put in a number of different new ones, also automatic license plate readers, which so they can traffic and catch people. That's kind of a post. It's still part of the component is establishing a safe area. There's more police force down here. We do something for coordinated entry now on big nights where we make downtown more like you're visiting an NFL bowl game where everybody's kind of getting screened on the way in. And we have weapons detection on dogs. Believe it or not, they can do that now. So it's just a canine that can walk by and you can sniff if you have a weapon on you. But we're also looking to augment that with our businesses because we understand we can't do this alone. So we have multiple different incentive programs, one of which being our SAFE program, which really we partner among our businesses, which allow them to add individual cameras to the exterior of their spaces. But the unique component of it is, in order to get our funding, they have to partner with OPD. And what that allows is if they agree, OPD can tap into their cameras instantly, as needed. They don't sit there and monitor them all day, but if they know something's happening, they can immediately get to their camera systems. So you can see what that takes from a camera network when you say, okay, I have to put mine on every corner, this, that, and the rest, when you can now partner and potentially have cameras throughout the entire area. And that's for any business, that not just for bars and nightclubs. That's, hey, if you own a property and it's down in this area, we want to come alongside you with it. There's a whole other host of things that OPD is also doing and kind of changing the way that they monitor and patrol. And I think the most significant component is literally myself and a number of other components, we meet with the chief of police, not like, you know what I mean, the sergeant. That's not degrading, but that's just the level of height that the attention that's being focused on this every week. It's every Monday we meet, we talk about what happened, you know, this weekend, what was good, what was bad, and how do we tweak it. One of the things they look at, you know what I mean, is how violent those components things are, how many fights broke out, all those type of things that you expect from the track. And from a very high level component, we've seen all those things literally drastically decrease, in some cases going down to zero on an extensive basis. Are we there yet? No. We have more work to do. But it's kind of like turning an ocean liner. You know what I mean? It's like you don't just do all these things and then ultimately, okay, bam, these changes. It's about changing behavior. But I can assure you the commitment is there from both our side and wanting to make sure downtown is a place that people want to come and feel safe when they come, but also at the police department, ensuring that we create a safe side.
I know as we increase density, we will increase those problems, and I appreciate the response to that. The other area that I'd like to see more developed is retail. And I know we compete with some Asian malls just outside of the city core, and we haven't really developed a retail district downtown. I know that space is increasing, but not a district. Any talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So my former life, I was really focused on the retail real estate industry. So when I came here 12 years ago, that was kind of
What
a
you
big
do
thing.
that formalize?
Yeah, they were like, okay, well, get some more retail. And we've had some success, with the Walgreens, and believe it or not, Taco Bell is a success as we see more name brand making a commitment here. One of the pieces of the master plan as well, as you heard, the built environment, one of the main, I think, challenges outside of the things that we can't change. We can't change that our number one outlet malls in Orlando and our number one, and one of the number one top 10 in a regular mall, the Mall of Millennia, is also, we can't change that. Nor do we want to change that. But we can change the way downtown operates and feels. And if you think of retail, most of us when we visit retailers don't anticipate visiting a place that is to say inaccessible, right? You're like, I gotta park in this parking garage over here, I gotta walk all this way. Like you're gonna find the path of least resistance. You know what I mean? And go get what you need there. So one of the components, the third component of the master plan, is looking at how space downtown is utilized. That involves a number of different things. We've asked them to identify, hey, are there any impediments in city code that is preventing retailers from coming here? And what are they? So let's change those. We've also asked them to look at, ultimately, what would create the environment, how do we set the tables, a term I use, for retailers wanting to show up, making sure there's access and available parking. And that may not necessarily be permanent parking. You know, the pandemic changed the way a lot of us buy things, right? A lot of us potentially do curbside delivery, right? That's here to stay, I think many people would agree, or Uber Eats, or those type of things. So it's identifying all those metrics that we can control, and ultimately, again, setting the table so that they want to come here. I'm telling you, I'm more excited about what comes out of the master plan than I'm excited by any other study. We do a lot of studies, because I truly see over the next 10 years, a lot of it is investment heavy, meaning you're going to see obviously physical changes. We talk about changing the way the streets operate, but the outcome of that, I think, has more potential to really change the look and the feel of our downtown than many things we've done in the recent past. And this is all coming on the heels of what you heard me talk about, the sports entertainment corridor, where people are coming here now, so people are getting comfortable with being in Orlando. It's how do we get them to matriculate throughout the area while we're here. So those businesses ultimately can be sustainable, because if you have a business that doesn't do any business, you're not going to be there long, and that's not Orlando's goal.
Are they going to expand the hours of Sunrail? Because if they did that, it would be a lot easier. You can get to Winter Park in 10 minutes. You can get to Maitland in 13. But people coming in can't get back once they're in.
So that's something that's talked about so often. And I think the challenge with it is when Sunrail was originally envisioned, you probably heard the term commuter rail. And that's effectively the way it was designed. Commuter rail is office worker commuter rail, right? How do you get to work and to home? It does not serve traditionally an entertainment style environment where people are looking to spend more time here, which is we're obviously looking for them to do. So it is significantly discussed. If I was here, I was going to say anything that, yes, that's in the hopper, we're doing it. I'm telling you if it is, and I want to do that. But I do think, just me personally, at some point in time, because demand has to be there, it's very expensive, you can imagine, to keep a train moving back and forth. And the few times that we've done it, we've actually funded it personally through our group, to run for various events and things like that. And the ridership hasn't been there. And I think that's fair to say, right? It's a kind of a one-off. If somebody does things one-off, you're not aware of it potentially, you're not used to it, you may not use it as if it was consistent. Say, okay, I know that if I'm ever going to go to a Magic game, I can always just hop on the Sunrail. So I think it'll be, I hope that it really truly gets there in time. I know the want and desire is there. I think the use has to be there for the community as well to make it financially feasible. But as I mentioned to Bob earlier, I think when Brightline enters the picture, it just enhances connectivity. And ultimately, as you start to augment multiple components of transportation, they all wind up getting easier. They kind of all feed on each other because you can start to access more places. So I think as you see those come over, the use case starts to make more sense, and we can see those augments, as they start to happen on a more permanent basis. Lake Eola Master Plans. We can talk about that. We just actually recently finished a project called Lake Eola Master Plan with our Parks Department. So that re-envisioned the entirety of Lake Eola. Lake Eola, a beautiful place, amazing park. Almost 3 million people visit there a year. We have one of the top farmers markets. However, if you take a step back and you think about it, a lot of the components of Lake Eola have just been put in over time with great ideas or fun things to do between the Red Pagoda or the Swan Boat area. So it can almost, or the Sea Arc, which are all great in their own uses, but they don't all work together as a holistic city park. So we had a work with a group, GAI, to re-envision that entire city park. We actually won a fairly prestigious award for it in the context of what it was done. So there are no, the project has to be funded. We will be a significant funder of that, but we will not be the whole. But we do see that hopefully start to be in that process within the next 2 to 3 years.
With New Year's Eve parties?
Bob's been trying to get us to New Year's Eve parties for 10 years. I think that was the first thing he ever said to me, so we'll see. To be determined. I don't know what time it is. It might be getting a little late, but 2 more questions. Anybody 2 more questions? And I'll stay if anybody has more.
Dave, talking about the things that are currently hybrid working, there is a lot of office dedicated to come online. How much in your whole process do you guys say, okay, that's going to be fulfilled, you work for the economic development, or correlation economic development? I mean, how are we going to get that much office space filled?
Sure. So, yes and no, and here's why. We work with OEP, or a partnership to that extent, on business recruitment. So when you heard me talk about EA Sports, we work on recruiting businesses ultimately, hopefully to come here and make downtown their location, we love them their headquarters. Do we get to the nuances and say, hey, you can't build office because we don't think that you can fill it? No, ultimately it's not our place, right? To a large extent, the financial markets handle that on their own, and a developer, should the numbers not work out, they're not going to be able to get the funding that they need ultimately to develop it. Office buildings, from a contextual standpoint, typically need to be 50% or more pre-leased before a developer can get his funds, and then they look to lease out the rest throughout the process. With all that being said, you heard me mention Lincoln Properties a few times, but I said I mentioned Lincoln Properties a few times because they developed most of our office space. There you go, over the last few years. Between what they were basically putting an office building online once a decade. They did Suntrust Tower, then they did Aspire, then they did Truist Plaza. If you look at what we've just done recently, between Truist Plaza being delivered, EA Sports facility being delivered, and now potentially having the Parcel X component, which is another 185,000 square feet being delivered, we have more office coming online in probably 2 or 3 years than we've had in probably 20 years. And it's financeable, and it's ultimately getting the pre-leases that it needs, which is all great. Now, to the component of hybrid work is affecting those leases, and companies are actually leasing spaces differently. The nuance to that is there's actually a higher demand for more expensive real estate, because in order to encourage people to come back to work, it's not, they want to have a space that they enjoy coming to, and it has all the appropriate, safety mechanisms of clean AC systems and the rest. So we're actually seeing a benefit from that. We've actually lured a number of companies out of the Northeast here. Most of us know that Florida, we've been a receiver city of this pandemic. A lot of people have come here as refuge. Now, will that all continue? I certainly hope so. But we don't get involved with saying no. We're actually excited to see them come in, and we try to do everything we can to get them up and out of the ground, because that's the most challenging part. Once they're here, it's a little bit easier to make sure we keep filled, but ultimately we want to see them. Okay. Any more? One more question, and then again, I'm happy to stay around.
Will this presentation be online?
It won't be online, but you can email me, myself, or Rose. We're happy to send it to you.
We're actually
Yes.
that's a YouTube video.
Okay, perfect. YouTube video.
Yeah. So the fact that there's a housing shortage, doesn't that affect the real estate, commercial real estate market? If people come here and they want to have an office here, they can't find a place.
Yeah, I mean, nothing works in isolation from that aspect. The components, I think, that we see in the housing shortage is oftentimes on the affordable housing shortage. The housing that we've already had is here, and we continue to grow that. We have more people moving in, it's raising upward demand on those, in addition to the rest of the society. So, has it, I think, impacted from where I see the desire for people to want to be here? Not yet. Could it at some point? Potentially. And we'll just have to monitor and see how that goes. From our investment component, we work with a lot of developers that bring market rate residential here, because we also make that important. But from our investment standpoint, it's been focusing on making sure we have that affordable housing options available, so that effectively anybody who wants to be here can hopefully find a space so they can be here. It doesn't feel like it's unattainable in order to it's an environment people can take part in. So thank you everyone. I'm happy to stay and answer any questions. Appreciate you.